The moment I discovered what my daughter had done felt like a gut punch I never saw coming. I had always thought I knew her well after all. She was my child, but nothing could have prepared me for the revelation that she had managed to rack up an eye-watering $90,000 in credit card debt. And all in my name. I remember sitting at the kitchen table, staring at the pile of bills and statements in front of me, my hands trembling and my mind racing. The numbers didn't seem real at first, like a cruel joke or a misprint. How could she have spent so much money without me noticing? How could she betray my trust so thoroughly? The disbelief was overwhelming. It wasn't just the money. It was the violation of trust, the feeling that someone I had nurtured, guided, and protected had used me in the most egregious way possible. Every purchase, every swipe of that credit card was a reminder that she had chosen her own desires over honesty, over respect, over the very relationship that had formed the foundation of our family. I replayed the moments in my head. Times I thought she was out with friends, or at the mall, seemingly innocent outings. Now I understood that those times were not innocent at all. They were the moments when my name and credit were being exploited. The shock morphed slowly into anger, simmering beneath the surface, sharp and unrelenting. I also thought about the practical realities of what this meant for me. $90,000 in debt is not a small mistake. It's a financial catastrophe. My credit score could be destroyed, affecting my ability to make major purchases, secure loans, or even handle banking with ease. And on top of that, the stress of trying to figure out how to stop further damage, contact the bank, and understand the legal implications pressed down on me like a weight I couldn't shake. Every minute I spent thinking about it made the betrayal sting even more. This wasn't just a teen impulse or a momentary lapse in judgment. This was a deliberate, sustained act that had consequences I would bear until she made it right. But amid the shock and anger, I also recognized something critical. This was a moment that demanded action. It wasn't enough to feel hurt or betrayed. I had to confront her, make her face the reality of what she had done, and ensure that she understood the seriousness of her actions. Letting this slide, ignoring it, or making excuses for her would not only fail to teach her responsibility, but could also endanger our entire family's financial stability. This moment, painful and devastating as it was, became a turning point. It forced me to take a hard look at boundaries, accountability, and the consequences of choices. I knew that how I responded would shape her future, and in a way, define her character. The shock, disbelief, and emotional turmoil of discovering her betrayal were only the beginning. They ignited a fire within me, a determination to make things right, to restore balance, and to ensure that this reckless behavior would never be repeated. In that instant, I realized that parenting wasn't just about guidance in happy moments. It was about holding firm even when it hurts, and demanding accountability when trust is broken. That $90,000 debt became not just a financial burden, but a pivotal lesson in responsibility, consequences, and the hard truths of life. The moment I fully grasped the financial consequences of my daughter's actions, the weight of reality hit me harder than the initial shock. $90,000 in credit card debt isn't just a number. It's a life-altering burden, one that has immediate, tangible consequences on every aspect of your financial life. I sat down, carefully reviewing the statements, and my heart sank as I realized the scope of the damage. Interest rates on credit cards are unforgiving, and with such a massive balance, the interest alone could spiral out of control if not addressed immediately. Each day that passed without resolution meant more money lost to fees and compounding interest, and suddenly I was staring at a potential financial nightmare that I had to manage because of someone else's reckless choices. Beyond the numbers, I thought about the ripple effects this debt could have on my life. My credit score, carefully built over decades of responsible financial behavior, was now hanging in the balance. A single report of such a large unauthorized debt could mark me as a financial risk in the eyes of lenders, making it difficult or even impossible to qualify for loans, mortgages, or even simple credit in the future. The damage wasn't just theoretical. It would have real consequences on my ability to make major life decisions, from buying a house to financing a car or securing favorable insurance rates. The sense of vulnerability and exposure was overwhelming. I felt like my financial stability, something I had worked so hard to secure, had been ripped away in an instant. Legal implications added another layer of stress. Identity theft, fraud, and unauthorized use of a credit card in someone else's name are serious matters, and I knew I had to protect myself while also addressing the wrongdoing. If this had gone unnoticed for any longer, the banks or credit card companies could have taken steps against me, leaving me to prove my innocence and navigate complex legal processes. The thought of being entangled in legal disputes over debt that wasn't mine was both exhausting and infuriating. I realized that this situation required immediate action, both to recover the financial damage and to prevent it from escalating further. I also reflected on how this level of debt could affect my daily life. Managing expenses, budgeting, and planning for the future suddenly became a much more delicate balancing act. Every purchase I made would now have to be carefully considered, because any misstep could worsen the financial strain. The freedom I had previously taken for granted, freedom to live without constant financial anxiety, was suddenly gone, replaced by a pressing sense of responsibility and urgency. Despite all this, I knew that simply feeling stressed or angry wouldn't solve the problem. I had to confront my daughter, make her understand the gravity of her actions, and ensure that she took full responsibility for repaying the debt. The financial consequences were severe, but they also presented an opportunity, a chance to teach her about accountability, the dangers of impulsive spending, and the lifelong importance of managing money responsibly. In facing this crisis head-on, I realized that the lessons she would learn from this experience could shape her financial behavior for the rest of her life, preventing future mistakes and instilling a sense of responsibility that couldn't be taught any other way. Confronting my daughter about what she had done was one of the most difficult and emotionally charged moments of my life. I knew that this wasn't just about money. It was about teaching her the importance of responsibility, accountability, and the consequences of her actions. I wanted her to understand that trust, once broken, isn't easily repaired, and that actions, no matter how impulsive or reckless, always carry weight. The conversation wasn't going to be easy, and I braced myself for resistance, excuses, and possibly even anger. But I knew that as a parent, my role wasn't to coddle her mistakes. It was to guide her toward understanding the severity of her decisions. When I finally sat her down, I could see a mixture of fear, guilt, and defiance in her eyes. I started by calmly laying out the facts: how she had accumulated $90,000 in debt, how it was all in my name, and how serious the repercussions could be for both of us. I didn't raise my voice or resort to threats. Instead, I focused on clarity and honesty, making sure she understood every detail. I explained the impact on my credit, the potential legal consequences, and the long-term financial damage she could have caused. I wanted her to see that this wasn't a minor mistake or a prank. It was a serious betrayal that had real, tangible consequences. Her initial reaction was a mix of denial and defensiveness. She tried to downplay the situation, blaming peer pressure, the thrill of spending, or claiming she didn't understand the full implications of her actions. But I refused to let her evade responsibility. I emphasized that ignorance was not an excuse when it came to financial accountability, and that being a part of a family also meant respecting the trust and security of others. I wanted her to understand that every action has consequences, and that avoiding responsibility only makes the problem worse. I then explained the path forward. She would be responsible for repaying every dollar she owed. I outlined a plan that would make her accountable, from budgeting her allowance and income to contributing consistently toward clearing the debt. I made it clear that this wasn't a punishment for punishment's sake. It was a necessary step for her to learn responsibility and begin to rebuild trust. She would experience firsthand the difficulty of rectifying a mistake of this magnitude, and in doing so, develop the maturity and discipline that were essential for her future. Throughout the process, I also emphasized the lessons behind the consequences. I wanted her to understand that money isn't just a tool for indulgence. It represents effort, responsibility, and trust. Misusing it, especially at the expense of others, erodes relationships and damages reputations. I stressed that the world is unforgiving, and learning accountability at home was her first chance to understand the importance of making careful, ethical choices. By the end of our discussion, I could see a shift in her demeanor, a mixture of remorse, reflection, and a willingness to take action. The confrontation had been hard, but it was necessary. Accountability isn't something that can be taught with words alone. It requires facing the consequences head on, and I was determined to guide her through that journey, ensuring she learned lessons that would stay with her for a lifetime. The conflict that followed my confrontation with my daughter was intense and emotionally exhausting. It wasn't just a simple discussion or an argument over money. It became a battle of wills, emotions, and family dynamics that tested both of our patience and resilience. She was young, impulsive, and unprepared to fully grasp the magnitude of her actions, and naturally she resisted at first. There were tears, raised voices, and even moments where she tried to deflect blame, insisting that circumstances or friends had influenced her decisions. It was difficult to see her struggling to accept responsibility, but I knew that pushing through this tension was essential. If I backed down or allowed her to avoid the consequences, the lessons she needed to learn would be lost, and the financial impact would continue to haunt us both. I realized early on that resolving this conflict required more than authority. It required a balance of firmness, empathy, and guidance. I had to show her that while her actions were unacceptable, she still had a chance to make things right. I explained that conflict is a natural part of life, and that learning to navigate disagreements, especially when personal responsibility is at stake, is crucial for personal growth. By framing the situation not just as punishment, but as an opportunity to correct mistakes, I hoped to guide her toward understanding the deeper implications of her choices. The practical side of resolving this conflict was equally challenging. We had to work out a repayment plan for the $90,000 debt, which was overwhelming for both of us. I helped her understand budgeting, prioritizing expenses, and managing her money responsibly. It wasn't easy. There were setbacks, miscalculations, and moments of frustration, but each step of the process became a real-world lesson in discipline, accountability, and the value of hard work. I made it clear that there were no shortcuts. She would face the consequences of her spending and contribute consistently until the debt was cleared. This wasn't just about paying back money. It was about rebuilding trust and demonstrating a commitment to responsibility. Emotionally, the conflict forced us both to confront our feelings. For me, there was disappointment, hurt, and anger at the betrayal of trust, but also a determination to guide her toward growth. For her, the emotions ranged from shame and guilt to frustration and fear. These moments of tension were painful, but they were necessary. They allowed her to truly feel the weight of her actions and to begin understanding the importance of accountability in a personal and tangible way. Over time, as she began to take responsibility and adhere to the repayment plan, the intensity of the conflict gradually gave way to a sense of resolution. The tension didn't vanish overnight, but we moved from confrontation to collaboration. She started to see that facing consequences could lead to personal growth, and that acknowledging mistakes is a vital part of maturity. The conflict, though challenging, became a transformative experience, one that not only repaired some of the financial damage, but also strengthened our understanding of responsibility, trust, and the difficult but necessary lessons that life sometimes imposes. The lesson in responsibility was the most important outcome of the entire ordeal, and it became clear to me that my daughter needed to truly understand the consequences of her reckless actions, not just in terms of money, but in terms of character and trust. The $90,000 debt she had incurred wasn't just a financial mistake. It was a reflection of immaturity, impulsivity, and a lack of understanding about the impact her choices could have on others. I knew that if she didn't internalize the gravity of what she had done, this behavior could repeat itself in countless ways throughout her life, creating patterns of irresponsibility that would be difficult to break. From the beginning, I made it clear that responsibility isn't optional. It's a fundamental part of being a trustworthy and reliable human being. Every dollar she had spent in my name had consequences, and she would be the one to pay it back, piece by piece. I wanted her to experience first, and what it feels like to work for something, to make sacrifices, and to prioritize responsibility over convenience or instant gratification. It wasn't enough to lecture her about the importance of money management or honesty. She needed a practical, real-world lesson that she could carry with her for the rest of her life. The repayment process itself became a daily reminder of accountability. She had to track her spending, adjust her lifestyle, and contribute every available resource toward clearing the debt. There were moments of frustration and resentment, as the weight of her actions became impossible to ignore. Yet these were precisely the moments where the lesson sank in the deepest. Each payment she made was more than just money. It was a tangible symbol of taking responsibility for her choices and repairing the trust she had broken. Slowly, she began to understand that true responsibility requires effort, perseverance, and a willingness to face uncomfortable truths. Beyond the financial lesson, this experience also taught her about the broader consequences of dishonesty and impulsivity. Actions, especially ones taken without consideration for others, ripple outward, affecting relationships, reputations, and opportunities. I emphasized that responsibility isn't just about paying debts. It's about integrity, accountability, and owning up to mistakes in every aspect of life. By confronting the fallout of her behavior head-on, she began to see the importance of thinking ahead, making informed choices, and respecting the trust that others place in her. Over time, I noticed a shift in her attitude. The initial defensiveness and denial gradually gave way to reflection, humility, and a growing sense of maturity. She began to approach decisions with greater thoughtfulness, to communicate more openly, and to understand that her actions have consequences beyond immediate gratification. The $90,000 debt, once a source of anger and despair, became a powerful tool for teaching lifelong lessons. She learned that responsibility is earned, not given, and that trust must be protected through consistent, conscientious behavior. By the time the debt was fully repaid, the transformation was evident. She had not only cleared the financial burden, but had also gained a deeper understanding of accountability, the weight of her actions, and the importance of integrity. This lesson in responsibility wasn't easy. It was painful, challenging, and required constant effort, but it was one of the most valuable experiences of her life. It ensured that she would carry the principles of honesty, discipline, and accountability into every future decision, shaping her into a more mature and conscientious individual capable of navigating life's challenges with awareness and respect.